Hello everyone, good morning. So how are you doing? We hope you are doing great and wonderful, and along with prelims you are also devoting few minutes or at least few hours for sociology. So this is a short session on the assignment that we had on GS Ghurye. We have been studying sociology paper 2 and we have covered at least three thinkers, three assignments. First one on GS Ghurye, then on M.N. Srinivas, and third one was on A.R. Desai. So the first discussion that we had was on GS Ghurye. The next one will be a combined discussion on M.N. Srinivas and A.R. Desai. Now we did not provide any recorded session because we did not want a raw recording to be on public platform, and that is why we have chosen to share with you a small introduction, a small summary of whatever discussion that we had on that day. It is a small topic and the book that was to be referred was Indian Sociological Thought by B.K. Nagla. Now most of the students, they faced problems because the topics under this chapter GS Ghurye, some of those topics might not be relevant to the exam from the exam point of view. So the question in the minds of most of the aspirants was what to study from that chapter and what not to study. So before starting that, one would have to study the Indological or the textual perspective that was given. That is a kind of introduction to the thinkers, to the Indologists. Now what do we understand by Indology? Indology, as we know, it is a textual perspective. So why is it a textual perspective? Which texts are we studying here? Are we studying any text? If I write a book today, will the next generation study my book? Or what kind of books, text are the sociologists studying in Indological perspective? They are studying the ancient texts because these sociologists or anthropologists, they were studying India before independence, what kind of society existed. Now who would tell them that okay, this was the kind of society which existed? They, most of them, had access to some of the books or text scrolls which were written by historians many years before them, or some of them were in the form of poetry, small stories like Amar Charit Katha, all those short stories, Jataka tales. So these described the social life and the cultural life which existed in pre-independence India. And the sociologists who wanted to study India, instead of relying on the functionalist perspective like the Western sociologists, they chose a different method of studying India. This is because, according to them, India was a unique nation. It had unique features, it had a unique culture which comprised of different religions, different clothing, different languages, different art, architecture, sculpture. That is why they wanted to study the Indian heritage which India had in order to understand the lifestyle of people. So the first portion is the study of or understanding of the Indological perspective. This Indological perspective is also known as contextually specificity, or the feature that it is proud of. Indological perspective, that is contextual, there is a context to it and there is a specificity to it. There is a specific nature. It is not a general nature, or it cannot be applied to every society. It is specific to Indian society and maybe to a particular Indian village in some particular area, or probably 2-3 villages. So we cannot generalize it, or we cannot universalize it. Indological perspective is contextual and specific. Now, which book should one refer to while studying this chapter? There are 2 books. First one is Indian Sociological Thought by B.K. Nagla. You can also refer to the first edition. And second one is the first few chapters from Caste and Race by G.S. Ghurye. This you may or may not refer because it is not available as a PDF on Telegram, I believe, but if you find it on other websites, then you can download it and read the first few chapters or the introduction part of this book. It will give you an idea of how G.S. Ghurye approached the concept of caste in India. If you do not want to refer to that book, you can refer to my task for today, TFT on G.S. Ghurye. It will make things easier. Now, if you are asked to define the theory of G.S. Ghurye or the Indological perspective of G.S. Ghurye, and you have many books to read, you have to make notes, you have to prepare the PYQ, and then you have to write the exam. So, what will be your approach? What should be on your table before the exam? Before the exam, you should have one sheet, one A4 sheet, one side of A4 sheet before the exam. This is known as a micro note. This is known as a micro note, and this is how you will make notes before the exam. Today your note may be 2 or 3 pages long, that is fine, but gradually when you pile up notes, then it will be very difficult to manage them. So, what do you do now? This is a sample that I am showing now, and this is just to guide you, to help you in the process of micro note making, so that you can practice it now that you have enough time. You can Google it away, you can doodle, and you can take advantage of your free time on Sundays or whenever you are getting bored from prelims preparation. You can start doing this, and then gradually you will definitely master it. I can assure you of that. There is nothing magical about it and nothing extraordinary about it. Everyone does it these days, and so you will also be able to do it. So, what do we hear? What do we see here? Here we have a main circle or oval shaped, which is written. We have the Indological perspective by G.S. Ghurye. I have written this here. You can start with a central subject, okay? Then you move on to the branches. Now, the first will be your definition. You will write the definition of Indology, or what do we understand by Indology. So, here we are studying the social or cultural life in India. You are studying social or cultural life in India, and in social and cultural life, what do we study here? We have literature. In literature, for example, Vedas, Shastras, epics, poetry by, for example, Kalidasa or Bhavabhuti. Now, literature is just one example. What could be other sources? Other sources could be historical in general, archaeological, sculptural, painting, iconography, everything which is either deciphered or undeciphered, everything which comes in history which is related to social or cultural life, that we can include in Indology. Now, an Indologist can be from sociology or anthropology. Most of the sociologists were from anthropological background, and so they have a definite knowledge about history. For example, Ghurye, he was quite proficient in Sanskrit, and that is why he could decipher the Sanskrit text and he could understand what was written there, what happened there, what happened in marriages, in deaths, in funerals, what happened between a guru and a shishya, what happened in marriage, for example, endogamy, exogamy, hypergamy. So he could understand this because he could decipher, he could read the Sanskrit texts. Now, the first classification that he gave was on caste system. He gave 6 features. First one was segmental, second consisted of hierarchy, then pollution and purity, certain disabilities and privileges, and occupation, as well as related to marriage. Now, when we talk of marriage, what was the connection here? In kinship, family and marriage, there were certain kind of restrictions. Okay, so who could marry whom, who could not marry whom? For example, there was caste endogamy and clan exogamy. Similarly, there was hypergamy. Hypergamy means marriage between equal castes. Then in tribe, a special point to note was that G.S. Ghurye was not interested in isolation. Isolation was favored by Ferrier Elwin. According to G.S. Ghurye, tribals were Hinduized. They had undergone the process of Hinduization, they had adopted their customs and traditions, they were interested in economic motivation or economic upliftment, social mobility, but this integration, this adoption of their customs and traditions was imperfect because they were doing it themselves. That is why G.S. Ghurye said that we should complete this integration and we could bring them, these tribes, into the mainstream society. We could assimilate them, okay, and not regard them as separate part of society or not consider them as isolated anymore. Then another point was on rural and urbanization. What is rural urbanization? It is also known as rural urbanization. Now, according to major Western theories, industrialization was the main feature of urbanization, or industrialization led to urbanization. What does this mean? It means that because machines came into being, machines started getting manufactured. That is why cities were built up. Around that, homes were built up, and that is why urban centers came up. But according to Ghurye, he said that no, it was the rural areas in India which gave rise to urban centers because there was a need for market. And one part of that rural society started developing a market where people would go. For example, we call them the sabji mandi. On Wednesday, let's say there was a sabji mandi and people will go there. Some people who had farms, they would sit on the roadside and they would start selling, and some people who did not own farms, so they would start go on buying. So initially there was barter system, then came currency and everything. So he said that it was the rural areas or rural hinterland which led to urban areas, and these were the roots. The rural areas were the roots of this urbanism, they were the source. Thus, there was an indigenous source of urbanism. We also have 2 more concepts. First one is cultural and the second one is integration. Now, what happens in culture? In culture, he says that there are 2 kinds of methods. First one is diffusion and second one is acculturation. Now, what happens in India? According to Ghurye, in India, diffusion was not responsible for the spread of culture. According to him, what was the process? The process was acculturation, and an example of acculturation was Hinduization. That means gradual adoption or gradual evolution of, let's say, the caste system by the Brahmins, and then first started with the Brahmins and then it spread to other sections. So, when you read about religion, you will find that the Indian sadhus, they were major carriers of this culture. But in diffusion, what happens? It is like a trickle down theory. So, in one area, suppose something is developed, culture is developed, and gradually it diffuses through everything. Just like water, if you open the dam and then it goes to different areas, to the any area which is downhill, it may go to a house, it may go to a farmland, it may go to a river, like that it goes. But here culture, according to Ghurye, there is a process, well defined process, which is responsible for the carrying or the flow of religion. It does not happen on its own. For example, here we see, let's say in diffusion, we are speaking of a culture. Okay. So, here according to diffusion, it is happening on its own. One culture develops here and then it spreads. But according to Ghurye, what happens in acculturation? In acculturation, what he says that, for example, Brahmins, they decide certain norms and rules, and then it is followed by the other sections of society. Okay. So, there is a carrier involved here who is responsible for this acculturation, and this entire process is known as Hinduization. For example, the tribals, they adopted Hindu customs and traditions, so they were Hinduized, but they did not do it on their own, because there was a certain standard, what culture to follow, what traditions to follow, what food habits to follow, what food habits to leave, to eat non-vegetarian or not, to leave non-vegetarian food, or to cover the upper part of body. So, everything which is related to culture, they are getting from the standard set by the Brahmins, and this process is known as the acculturation of Indian traditions or Indian ways of lifestyle. Now, what happens in national unity and integrity? According to Ghurye, what does it say? What does he say? This portion is kind of controversial. So, here what he says is that in any country or in any civilization, there are certain factors which hold the society together, which are responsible for the unity of that society, the culture, the civilization. But what happens when there is a country or nation or civilization which has diverse groups? Will they play a role in the integration? Yes, the groups will definitely hold the society together, but when one is excessively attached to that particular group, here the term to be noted is excessive attachment. So, when someone is excessively attached to one particular group, then they may act as threats or danger to the unity. He gave 5 examples: the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, the backward classes, Muslims as religious minority groups, and the linguistic minorities. So, here the care has to be taken that you write exactly what is written in B.K. Nagla. Please do not try to twist the author's words. Here we also have Indian sadhus. So, what do we learn here about Indian sadhus? That they are responsible for maintaining order in society. So, religion had a certain role to play in primitive societies, in pre-independent society, pre-independent India, and they made sure that the rules and regulations, the norms and customs were followed by the people of society, and that is how they were bearer of the moral order, societal order, law and order. But there are certain controversies also, there are certain critiques also of G.S. Ghurye's theory. The first one was that he considered the Indian society or Indian traditions as the Hindu traditions. Okay. What does this mean? It means that this was the standard for any social mobility, social change. And that is why it was considered as narrow by other sociologists. So they wanted that other kind of standards should also be brought in instead of only the Brahmanical perspective, so that a wider view of society may be understood, so that people could be equally represented. For example, in India today we have concept of representative government. What does it mean? It means we are choosing people from different caste, class, race, religion, so that everyone is equally represented. Similarly, in Indian society, the study of Indian society, also Indian sociology, other sociologists wanted that not only the Brahmanical standard but other standards should also be included. Some of them said that he viewed too much on the past, on the textual perspective, but as mentioned by those who favored his theories, they said that no, in order to understand the present, studying the past was also important, and Ghurye was not quite ignorant about the present tensions and problems which the society was facing. He was very much aware, although he ignored or he did not choose to define modernity, yet he was aware of the present tensions and problems, and he was the builder of Indian sociology, builder of Indian sociologists. He was a path breaker, a trendsetter, and he gave the food for thought to Indian sociologists. So this we should always bear in mind, because every person who starts a new discipline has to face different challenges by the previous generation and by the next generation. Yet coming out by themselves to form a new discipline, or to establish or build, or to help the discipline grow by itself, is a humongous task. So this is all that you have to write, and when you are writing the Indological perspective, please mention every time that he used the textual perspective to study caste, to study marriage, to study kinship, because otherwise this theory would be like any other theory. So this you have to mention every time, because he was the sole Indologist that we have to study. Even though Louis de Moy is in the syllabus, but the Indological part is not much in focus. So here you have to keep in mind the different names of the books that he used, what all he studied, in order to understand or gain a deeper understanding of Indian society. That is all for today. I hope this session has been useful and fruitful. I hope that you are able to come up with the mind map, the thought map of Indian society. And Indian society is easy and you are able to decipher it. So all the best, happy learning, happy journey. Have a beautiful day. Thank you.